The movie starts with a few flashes of an elevator going up as Thomas wakes up. There's a container marked WKCD on the elevator with him. When the elevator reaches the top, a netted door above him opens and a group of boys surrounds him. After coming out of the box, he panics and starts running until he falls down. He stands up to find himself in a small glade surrounding tall walls. The next moment, he's thrown into a pit. This is when Albie approaches him and introduces himself as the one who's running the place. When Albie asks him where he's from, Thomas replies he doesn't remember anything, not even his name. Albie comforts him by saying he will remember his name in a few days. He then takes Thomas out to the pit and gives him a tour of the glade. Albie tells him that the elevator, or the box as they refer to it, ascends to the surface once per month, carrying supplies and a new member. They all call themselves Gladers, and none of them remember their past. Soon, Albie introduces Thomas to Newt, who is Albie's second in command. Albie also explains to Thomas the rules of the glade, which include not harming anyone and never going beyond the walls. Later on, Thomas is having a chat with a kid named Chuck who arrived a month earlier when he starts heading towards the wall, where he comes across Ben and Minho, who are known as the Runners. Chuck tries to stop him and tells him that the Runners are more familiar with a maze than anyone else, further explaining that there is some kind of maze beyond the wall. Thomas, however, continues to go towards the opening of the wall until a guy named Gally subdues him and prevents him from attempting to go beyond the wall. Thomas starts questioning Gally's behavior, but suddenly the wall starts shifting. In the evening, they start a celebration by lighting up a hay structure similar to a scarecrow. They have even developed their own set of musical instruments. During all of this, Newt walks up to Thomas and offers him a drink. He explains to Thomas that every day and night, the door in the enormous wall opens and shuts before the structure of the maze changes. Runners explore the labyrinth during the day to find a way to exit the glade. He claims a person will end up dead at the hands of unknown creatures known as grievers if they spend a night in the maze. Newt then proceeds to introduce Thomas to a few other people. Soon, Gally invites him for a fight. After a short scuffle between them, Thomas remembers his name when his head hits the ground. The night ends with the loud shriek of a griever from the other side of the wall. That night, Thomas has flashbacks, and he notices one woman saying, "Wicked is good." He wakes up and finds Albie, who takes him around to show him more of the sights. Albie tells him that they have lost many of the boys to fear. He then shows Thomas how the names of all the dead boys have been crossed off on the wall. Thomas makes an effort to blend in and agrees to collect fertilizer from the woods. In the middle of the woods, he sees Ben, who doesn't look okay. Before Thomas can understand anything, Ben attacks him and blames him for everything. He says that he had seen Thomas. Thomas somehow manages to get away and starts shouting for help. Other people get there and get a hold of Ben. They find out that Ben has been stung, and Albie orders them to put him in the pit. Later on, Albie tells Thomas that this happens when someone is stung by a griever, and this process is called the changing. It makes a person aggressive and dangerous. In the evening, Minho drags Ben to the opening of the wall, where all the other people are standing with poles in their hands. Even though Ben begs them to let him stay, they force him to cross the wall before the opening is closed, and after that, Gally crosses Ben's name off the wall. That night, Thomas dreams again of the lady, reassuring him that wicked is good, and he also sees a young girl. After he wakes up, he sees Albie and Minho going into the wall opening. Newt informs him that they have gone in to learn what happened to Ben. He also tells Thomas that Albie was the first one to arrive and he knows more than anyone else about this glade. As the evening approaches, Albie still hasn't returned, and everyone is getting worried. They gather around the entrance and see Minho, who is coming out towards the wall with a severely hurt Albie. It's obvious they won't be able to make it before the doors close, so Thomas runs past the wall before the opening closes down. Minho commends him for risking his own life as they both pick up Albie and try to find a place to hide. Eventually, Thomas notices vines on the wall, and they decide to use them to lift Albie above the wall to keep him safe from the grievers. However, before they can do that, Minho notices a griever, and he runs away. Thomas holds his ground and manages to hide Albie as the griever passes by him. The griever has robotic legs and a scorpion tail, resembling an enormous bedbug. After a while, the griever notices Thomas and attacks him. He runs to save his life and climbs up a wall. The griever keeps chasing him, but Thomas manages to trap it in the vines. Just then, he meets Minho again and they start running. Suddenly, the wall starts moving as the maze starts changing its structure. This is when Thomas comes up with an idea and he waits for the griever to reach him. As the griever gets close, he runs through the wall, but the griever is unable to make it through and dies. The next morning, the wall opens up and all the boys are waiting by the opening for Thomas and others. They don't see anyone and start losing hope. But as they're leaving, one of them notices their 3 friends coming out of the maze. Minho tells everyone that Thomas killed one griever, which worries Gally, and he convenes a gathering of the Gladers. The majority are happy with Thomas's actions. However, another faction led by Gally believes that ever since Thomas arrived, things have started changing, such as grievers attacking Ben and Albie during the day. He proposes that Thomas should be punished. Newt asks Minho what he thinks since he has spent the night in a maze with Thomas. To everyone's surprise, Minho tells them to promote Thomas to be a runner. Suddenly, their meeting is cut short by the siren of an elevator coming up. They all run to check it out and find that it's a girl. She holds a note in her hand mentioning she is the last one ever. They are really concerned about not receiving any supplies this time. The girl wakes up, raises her hand, and says Thomas before passing out again. They decide to wait for her to regain consciousness so they can find out more about her. Thomas is unable to recognize her. To get more information, he plans to enter the maze again. Minho stops him by saying that no other runners are willing to run into the maze again. However, he is willing to go with Thomas. So later on, he joins Thomas alongside a few other boys and they head into the maze. They find the griever's body and discover a strange object inside that reads the number 7 on an electronic display. WKCD appears on the device as well. Before it gets too late, they leave for the glade. They have realized that whoever supplies them also created the grievers. This information upsets Gally even more, and he says that Thomas is attempting to abandon the rules. He believes that the rules are the only things that have held them together for the past 3 years. Newt thinks for a moment before punishing Thomas with 1 night in a pit with no food. He then officially declares Thomas a runner after his punishment is over, and this frustrates Gally. Soon, Minho takes Thomas to an abandoned hut where they have a map of the maze. He tells Thomas that he has run every inch of it. He further explains that as the maze changes during the day, various outside segments open up. The outer sections are all numbered and Section 7 was opened last night, so they plan to take a closer look at it the next day. Just then, they are informed that the girl is awake. They find out that she has climbed up the tower and is hurling objects at the boys below. Thomas tells her his name and she allows him to come up. After climbing the tower, he finds her holding a knife in her hand. He comforts her by saying that she will remember her name in a few days despite her memory being erased. However, she already knows that her name is Teresa. He tells her that everyone is worried because the box hasn't gone down since she arrived. He confesses to her that he's been having dreams about her and a woman stating wicked is good. Teresa takes out 2 syringes from her pocket and gives them to Thomas, saying these were there when she woke up. He takes them to Newt and asks him to inject them into Albie's arm, thinking it may cure him. Newt allows him. However, as soon as Thomas attempts to inject it, Albie wakes up and starts shouting that Thomas shouldn't be here. Seeing a chance, Teresa injects him and he calms down. Right then, Gally enters the hut and asks Thomas to go to the pit since it is evening. Later, Chuck brings him some food. Additionally, he requests that Thomas deliver a miniature statue he carved for his parents. He doesn't remember his parents, but he is certain that they are aware of him and they mourn him. When Chuck walks away, Thomas calls him back saying he can give it to his parents himself when they all leave. The following day, Thomas and Minho enter the maze with the tool they obtained from the griever. They reach the outer part where they find Ben's outfit. Suddenly, Thomas hears clicking sounds. He takes out the device and concludes that it is trying to show them a path. They follow it to a new part that Minho has never seen. They reach a place where the light turns green on the device, and a new section that looks like a sewer tunnel opens up. All of a sudden, a red light scans them, and the section begins closing up. They run to escape the trap, and despite all odds, they both manage to escape the maze. As soon as they reach the glade, Thomas has an argument with Gally, but soon they are intervened by Teresa, who tells them that Albie is awake. They find Albie sitting silently with tears rolling down his cheeks. He tells them that he has remembered everything. He further states that Thomas was their favorite and asks Thomas why he has come here. Suddenly, they hear someone shouting and they find out that the wall opening has not closed yet. As they try to figure out what's going on, they see that the opposite portion of the opening has also opened up. Soon, a group of grievers enters the glade, and this assault results in a lot of deaths and the destruction of the glade. Gally protects himself by locking himself in the box, while Thomas tries to keep Newt, Teresa, Chuck, and Albie safe. Chuck is rescued shortly after being held hostage by one of the grievers. In the end, they cut off its tail. Unfortunately, one of the grievers grabs Albie and takes him away. While he is being taken away, he asks Thomas to get everyone out. After things finally calm down, Gally attacks Thomas, blaming him for everything. Thomas uses the cut-off tail to sting himself, which helps him recall more. He is saved by the other injection that Teresa had. The moment he wakes up, he finds out that Gally has taken over and has given them the choice of joining his faction or being pushed into the maze. Thomas tells everyone that he was one of the people who brought them all there. Newt hears everything and asks him to complete what he has started. Meanwhile, Gally is enraged, and as an act of sacrifice, he and his crew tie Thomas and Teresa to stakes outside the maze entrance. A few people question Gally's actions, but he convinces them by mentioning how bad things have gotten ever since Thomas arrived there. All of a sudden, the group that supports Thomas releases him. Thomas tells Gally that he would rather perish trying to flee than perish in that prison without trying, and alongside a few other boys and Teresa, he leaves the glade. They arrive at the loading dock area, where they notice one griever. They prepare to fight after handing over the device to Chuck, who notices another griever coming up from one of the edges, and eventually, 2 other grievers attack them. Chuck reaches the door with the device, and the walls keep moving to allow them to move in. After passing through the zone that resembles a sewer tunnel, they arrive at a locked door. To open it, Teresa must enter a numerical code. Thomas figures out that it must be the sequence of the different sections of the maze, and he asks Minho about it. As Minho starts mentioning the sequence, he is attacked by one of the grievers. However, one of the boys sacrifices himself to save him. Teresa enters the sequence he gives, and the door opens up to reveal a new section. Behind them, walls crush all grievers. To reach an exit, they travel through a few halls. They enter a lab where the scientists have all been killed, and a video begins to play. In this video, a woman introduces herself as Paige and informs them that although they are too young to remember it, there has been a global catastrophe caused by a phenomenon known as the flare. She belonged to a divisive organization known as the World Catastrophe Kill Zone Department, shortened to WCKD. This organization held the controversial view that by testing the children, they might monitor their minds and discover a way to deal with the flare. While she's explaining all of this, guerrilla troops get there and start gunning down other scientists. She congratulates themselves on passing the preliminary exam and reassures them that wicked is good. Paige shoots herself in the head before she ends the conversation. After the video ends, they find a door that provides access to the outside world. However, Gally gets there before anyone can leave. He's got a gun and he says that the glade is where they all belong. Thomas is about to get shot when Chuck leaps in front of the incoming bullet and saves him. Meanwhile, Minho throws his javelin into Gally's chest to take him out. Chuck dies after giving Thomas the bloodied statue. The armed men from the video rush in and take the children outside to some helicopters. At first glance, it appears to be a desert, but after some time, it becomes clear that they are outside a former city. Sand is everywhere and buildings are destroyed. Paige, who is still alive and wiping fake blood from her face, claims that the kids have taken the bait. She is surprised that more children survived. The movie ends with her saying that the maze was a success. If you enjoyed that recap, I got a good feeling you'll enjoy this one too. Click on the video on your screen for more.